Imagine the beaches before dawn, nothing but cold wind, black water, and the faint silhouettes of landing craft drifting toward a fortified shore. Now imagine this. The ramps drop, and everything goes wrong. Every plan, every hope, every ounce of courage crashing against an enemy ready in numbers, firepower, and determination no Allied commander had predicted. Picture the sand turning into a deadly trap of obstacles, explosive devices, and intersecting machine gun arcs. Troops pinned down, unable to push forward. Commanders watching the first waves vanish into smoke. Messages crackling across radios with one chilling theme: the landings are failing. Ask yourself, what if the largest amphibious invasion in history collapsed in its first hour? What if the Allies never broke through the beaches? What if D-Day, the moment meant to liberate Europe, became the greatest disaster of the war? This is not a fantasy. Historians agree the margin between triumph and catastrophe was razor thin, and tonight we step into that alternate razor's edge, where one failure reshapes the world. Welcome, history warriors. I'm Knightley, a passionate historian and war storyteller. You're about to witness history like never before, and now before the smoke settles, let's pull back and examine the world on the eve of this fateful gamble. War context. Before the invasion, Europe stood like a continent held in iron grips. Nazi Germany controlled vast territories, France, the Low Countries, much of Scandinavia fortified behind what they called the Atlantic Wall, a defensive line stretching thousands of kilometers. From cliffs to beaches, from bunkers to hidden artillery, every inch was engineered to break any invading force long before it reached open ground. Across the Channel, Britain had become a besieged fortress, carrying the weight of the free world on its shoulders. The United States, now fully committed, supplied men, machines, and resolve. Canada, Australia, and other allied nations contributed vital strength. Yet even combined, these forces faced a monumental challenge: breach the wall or watch Europe remain under Axis control indefinitely. The clock was ticking, and the world watched in silence as plans converged toward a single day. The stakes were beyond military. They were moral, political, and existential. A failure at Normandy would embolden the Axis, stretch the war by years, and potentially fracture Allied unity. The Soviet Union fought fiercely on the Eastern Front, but their pressure alone could not secure Western Europe. Every strategist understood that a second front was not optional, it was mandatory. Without it, any hope of liberation would wither. And so, hundreds of thousands of troops gathered in southern England, turning quiet towns into vast military staging grounds. Ships filled every harbour, aircraft crowded every airfield. Every soldier knew June 1944 was more than an operation. It was the hinge of history. But even with all this preparation, the fear remained. The first hours could decide everything. As the Allies assembled their greatest gamble, the Germans interpreted each signal, each movement, each rumour. Intelligence, deception, last-minute weather changes, all collided to form a fragile balance. One misstep, one unexpected defence, one unlucky break could unravel the invasion before it began. This was the calm before chaos, the breath before the plunge. Now let's step deeper into the minds and plans of the commanders shaping this colossal moment. Strategic build-up. In the months leading to the invasion, strategy became a battleground of its own. Allied planners faced a brutal truth. To land on Normandy's shores, they needed overwhelming force, flawless coordination, and a deception campaign so convincing that German commanders would hesitate even as the real attack unfolded. Operation Overlord depended not only on soldiers, but on illusions, phantom armies, fake radio traffic, inflatable tanks, and carefully planted misinformation. At the same time, logistics teams calculated staggering requirements: millions of tons of fuel, ammunition, food, and medical supplies. Every crate, every truck, every landing craft had its place in a vast blueprint. The scale was unprecedented, yet the room for error was minimal. Failure at the opening phase would not just halt the invasion, it would destroy the troops already committed. The Allies needed a perfect storm of timing and deception. On the Allied side, the central figure was General Dwight D. Eisenhower, a calm, level-headed leader with a gift for uniting strong personalities. He rarely raised his voice, but his resolve was unmistakable. His task? Balance British caution with American urgency, while ensuring the invasion force stayed focused on the primary objective. Beside him, British General Bernard Montgomery, bold and confident, pushed for a broad front assault, convinced that wide pressure would prevent German concentration. His insistence shaped the landing plans. Admiral Bertram Ramsay orchestrated the naval armada, while Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory commanded the skies. Each understood their role was a pillar. If one collapsed, the entire structure would fail. For the Allies, Normandy was not merely a battlefield. It was a doorway. If they forced it open, Europe could breathe again. If it stayed shut, liberation would fade into uncertainty. Across the Channel, German command wrestled with divided instincts. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the famed Desert Fox, argued that the invasion must be crushed at the waterline. His experience in North Africa taught him the power of rapid, decisive strikes. If the Allies secured a foothold, he warned, retaking that ground would be impossible under Allied air superiority. But his superior, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, believed the opposite. He insisted the armoured reserve should be kept inland, ready to counterattack once the main landing site revealed itself. This clash of strategic philosophies created dangerous delays. German armoured divisions were caught in a tug-of-war between two doctrines. Orders shifted, authority blurred, and when the invasion began, minutes lost to hesitation would cost hours that shaped the real war, and in our scenario intensify the failure unfolding on the beaches. Preparation also unfolded in workshops, hangars and shipyards. Allied engineers built specialized vehicles called Hobart's Funnies, tanks modified to clear mines, bridge trenches and crush obstacles. Amphibious DD tanks were designed to swim toward shore, though many crews quietly feared rough seas. Landing craft were tested, repaired, then tested again. Paratroopers rehearsed night jumps across fog-covered fields. Infantry practiced storming replica bunkers. Every scenario was drilled until muscle memory replaced fear. But even with all this, commanders understood the truth. No rehearsal could replicate German fire. No simulation could capture the chaos of combat. The soldiers knew it too. As the final days counted down, diaries filled with short entries, some hopeful, some resigned, all aware that the coming storm would define their generation. German preparations were no less intense. The Atlantic Wall was Rommel's obsession. He ordered thousands of obstacles, planted stakes tipped with explosives, steel barriers designed to rip open landing craft, mines buried beneath sand where boots would undoubtedly tread. He traveled the coast personally, urging troops to reinforce defenses, accelerate construction, and maintain constant vigilance. The first 24 hours of the invasion, he often said, will be the longest day. Artillerymen calibrated their guns. Machine gun nests refined interlocking arcs. Recon units scanned the Channel daily, searching for any clue that the invasion was imminent. Yet even the wall had weaknesses. Parts remained incomplete. Some units were understaffed. Many soldiers believed the main attack would hit Pas-de-Calais. In that assumption lay the seed of both the Allies' historical success and the catastrophic alternate reality we are exploring. As June approached, tension coiled tighter. A storm swept across the Channel, delaying the assault and fueling doubt. Commanders debated whether to launch or postpone. Meteorologists argued over shifting winds. The invasion hung on a fragile forecast that offered only a brief window of opportunity. When Eisenhower finally said, "Okay, let's go," every man involved felt the weight of that decision. Ships began to move. Aircraft warmed their engines. Troops climbed aboard, knowing the next sunrise might be their last. On the other side, German command misread the signs. Many officers left their posts for war games. Rommel himself traveled inland to visit his family. The stage was set not just for battle, but for the world-changing failure we're about to witness. Silence before the storm. And now the first shots erupt. Battle begins, dawn breaks in flashes, not sunlight. The horizon erupts with distant shells bursting along the French coastline. Allied ships advance in massive formation, steel giants slicing through restless waves. On every deck, Soldiers grip rifles with trembling hands, packs weighing on shoulders already tight with fear. Their eyes scan the dim silhouette of Normandy, a place they've only seen in maps, now transforming into the most dangerous shoreline on Earth. Then the first German artillery round whistles overhead. A towering plume of water erupts beside a transport craft, drenching troops in cold spray. Another shell follows, then another. The bombardment begins. Each man realizes the same truth. The invasion has started, ready or not. But none can predict what comes next, because this is the timeline where D-Day doesn't break open. It breaks down. As landing craft approach the beaches, disaster strikes early. Stronger than forecast winds whip the waves, tossing vessels off course. Units meant to land together drift apart. Commanders lose cohesion. Some craft sink outright, swallowed by brutal swells. Others struggle ahead but behind schedule. The DD tanks designed to swim ashore face the worst of it. One after another, they founder in the choppy water. Crews fight desperately to keep them afloat, but the sea shows no mercy. Only a handful survive the approach. Without armor, the infantry will hit the beach exposed, and the Germans, fully awake now, adjust their sights. Machine gun barrels swing, artillery angles, mortars thump from unseen pits. The curtain of fire thickens, and still, the ramps haven't dropped yet. At 06:30, the first wave slams into Omaha Beach, and the nightmare becomes reality. Ramps crash open, soldiers leap into waist-deep water, some stumbling under gear, others falling instantly under machine gun bursts that tear through the surf like invisible blades. Every Allied unit expects suppressing fire from battleships to neutralize defenses, but in this alternate reality, naval bombardment had landed too short or too scattered. The bunkers remain intact, the gun crews, unshaken, are fully operational. The beach becomes a gauntlet of intersecting arcs of fire, deadly accurate, unrelenting. Troops press forward because stopping means certain death. Water churns with explosions. Sand embankments provide little shelter. Officers shout orders drowned by gunfire. The invasion force wanted momentum. Instead, they have paralysis. And the Germans see it. At Utah Beach, the landing goes off target farther south than intended. In real history, this worked in the Allies' favor. In this timeline, it becomes a stumbling block. The terrain here is riddled with flooded fields, deep mud, and narrow causeways that funnel soldiers into predictable paths. German defenders perched in hidden positions unleash fire each time Allied troops try to break through the bottleneck. Engineers struggle to clear obstacles, while bullets hurl past their helmets. Medics drag the injured into shallow ditches that offer almost no cover. Communications falter, units intermingle. Confusion spreads faster than orders, and overhead, German spotters radio updates with chilling precision. Mortar fire lands closer, tightening the noose. This is no soft landing. It is a maze designed to swallow the first waves whole, and the Germans intend to finish the job. Sword Beach erupts in chaos of its own. British forces push forward, but German positions in fortified villas and reinforced trenches hold firm. Snipers pick off officers directing traffic. Machine gun nests remain active despite repeated attempts to silence them. A critical moment unfolds when a key landing craft carrying engineers and demolition gear is destroyed mid-approach. Without them, obstacles remain intact, blocking tanks from advancing beyond the sand. The infantry becomes stranded with little heavy support. German counterattack squads veterans of the Eastern Front move in, with ruthless efficiency, shifting between cover, firing at precise intervals. They know the terrain intimately. British troops cling to low ground, pushing inch by inch, but the cost rises sharply. Every meter gained feels temporary. Every step forward is met with an answer of steel and fire. The beachhead wavers. At Juno Beach, Canadian troops face a storm of resistance as German artillery targets landing zones with haunting accuracy. The beach narrows into a killing ground where every movement feels exposed. Engineers attempt to clear paths through mines and obstacles, but the density is overwhelming. Flames from burning vehicles cast an eerie glow over the waterline. The Canadians push with remarkable grit, but with mounting losses and shattered formations, their assault falters. Houses that should have been cleared remain full of defenders. Gun crews pour fire into the packed landing zones. The German commander in this sector, sharper than expected, calls for immediate reinforcements. Reserves rush to the front line, strengthening the defense before the Canadians can break inland. Allied officers attempt to rally their men, but the beach is turning into a trap. The foothold weakens by the minute, and inland breakthroughs remain distant dreams. Gold Beach sees mixed fortunes. Early progress sparks hope as some units breach the first line of defenses. But a devastating counterstroke from German artillery halts momentum almost instantly. A battery hidden in woodland unleashes a sequence of precise barrages, striking landing craft still unloading troops. The shore becomes choked with wreckage-twisted metal, burning fuel, debris scattered like skeletal remnants of failed momentum. Infantry pinned behind sparse cover call desperately for armor support. But the tanks assigned to this sector suffered heavy losses approaching the beach. Only a fraction make it ashore, and fewer still remain functional. Every advance is met with defensive firepower that seems to grow stronger, not weaker. German commanders sense the turning tide and tighten their grip. Gold Beach, meant to serve as a central route, inland begins to collapse into a costly stalemate. Inland, the airborne operations unravel. Paratroopers dropped overnight aim to seize bridges, road junctions, and disrupt German reinforcements. But strong winds and miscalculations scatter units across miles. Small groups land far from designated zones, some directly over German-controlled villages. Many are forced to hide, unable to contribute to the mission. Those who land correctly face fierce counterattacks. German garrisons react faster than expected, cutting off access to key objectives. Bridges remain in enemy hands. Roads intended for rapid Allied movement stay blocked. This failure ripples toward the beaches. Without airborne units disrupting German movements, reinforcements mobilize quickly. Columns of troops, armored cars, and artillery rush toward Normandy. The Allies plan to choke German response. Instead, they've cleared the path for it. The beaches are turning into cages and inland routes into walls. Mid-morning arrives, but no beach has broken through. On Omaha, commanders attempt desperate maneuvers. Officers rally isolated groups, trying to storm bluffs under increasingly heavy fire. Casualties climb. Units lose contact with their neighbors. A few squads nearly breach a weak point in the German line, but are cut down before establishing a foothold. Naval gunfire, intended to suppress strongpoints, hesitates due to fear of hitting Allied troops now scattered unpredictably. The firepower that could save them remains largely unused. Meanwhile, German defenders grow more confident. They shift machine gun teams to angles that catch advancing soldiers in deadly crossfire. Mortar crews rain shells with relentless precision. The landing force, already battered, now teeters on collapse. Every officer senses what's coming, the moment when momentum dies and retreat becomes the only survival. By early afternoon, the German High Command finally realizes something extraordinary. The Allies are failing. The beachheads are small, fragile, and unable to break inland. Communication intercepts confirm it. Visual reports confirm it. Even the faint rhythm of gunfire suggests a one-sided battle. This sparks a decisive move. Panzer divisions, previously held in reserve due to high-level disagreements, receive orders to mobilize immediately. Columns of tanks thunder toward Normandy. Crews leap into action. Engines roar, tracks grind against pavement. In our real timeline, delays and confusion slowed this response. Here, clarity arrives early. The Germans move while the beaches still burn. Once armor arrives, the invasion's already shaken structure will face a force it cannot repel. The Germans sense victory approaching and accelerate toward it. Late afternoon brings the turning blow. At Omaha, German counterattack units descend onto the high ground above the beach. Mortar teams increase fire. At guns, reposition with ruthless efficiency. Snipers eliminate medics, radio men, and officers, disrupting any chance of organized advance. Survivors cluster behind logs, metal scraps, anything resembling cover. They radio for backup that can't reach them. They wait for tanks that will never land. The tide rises, beach space shrinks, artillery closes in. Finally, an American commander makes a grim call. Portions of Omaha must withdraw. Landing craft brave the inferno to rescue who they can. This is the moment D-Day begins slipping away. British and Canadian beaches face similar collapse, with reinforcements unable to land under heavy fire. Officers doubt whether they can secure even a temporary fighting position. At Sword, German reinforcements, including armored units, push toward the front faster than expected. They launch local counterattacks, retaking ground and pushing Allied troops back to the waterline. At Juno, Canadian units hold bravely, but lack armor and cannot advance inland. The tide of resistance grows by the hour. At Gold, coordination fails entirely. German artillery suppresses every attempt at regrouping. Slowly, beach by beach, the invasion dissolves from a coordinated assault into isolated pockets of men fighting for survival. As evening approaches, commanders gather for frantic discussions aboard flagship vessels. Reports pour in, none encouraging. No breakthrough, no secure foothold, no inland progress. High casualties, severed communications, and German armor en route. This combination spells one outcome: full withdrawal. It takes courage to launch an invasion. It takes a different kind of courage to call it off before lives vanish entirely. Eisenhower, devastated but resolute, faces the harshest decision of his career. He orders the retreat. Landing craft surge toward beaches under crashing fire to evacuate as many men as possible. D-Day. The moment meant to liberate Europe has failed. Night falls over the beaches. Fires burn. Smoke drifts over the tide. German troops reclaim every inch. The Allies retreat into darkness, battered, silent, and unsure what comes next. Europe remains in German hands, but the story doesn't end here. This failure reshapes every front, every strategy, every political alliance. The consequences stretch far beyond the beaches of Normandy. And now let's confront the exact moment history turns. The turning point. The turning point. History rarely pivots in silence. It shifts in moments, tiny, precise, catastrophic. For the Allies on June 6th in this alternate timeline, the turning point is not one explosion, not one command, not one gust of wind. It is the accumulation of every misstep converging at the exact wrong hour. By late afternoon, the beaches are fractured. Units meant to reinforce the first wave are still offshore. Commanders on the ground cannot reach each other. German positions remain solid. But the decisive fracture arrives with one message: Panzer divisions mobilizing toward Normandy. The words ripple through Allied command like a cold blade. If German armor reaches the beaches before a foothold is secured, the invasion cannot survive. And at this moment, this critical, irreversible moment, nothing stands between those tanks and the coast. This is the fulcrum where Operation Overlord breaks under its own weight. The German counterstroke gathers momentum hours before the Allies expect it. Normally, high command hesitations delay tank deployments. Disagreements between Hitler, OB West, and Panzer commanders create friction, but not here. In this timeline, the misinterpreted Allied feints at Pas-de-Calais look weak and poorly coordinated. German intelligence officers conclude that Normandy is indeed the main invasion point and that the Allies are failing. This clarity removes all hesitation. Panzer Lehr Division prepares to move. Veteran crews run final checks with practiced efficiency. Officers review detailed maps, marking kill zones. Artillery coordinates fire plans. In the east, 21st Panzer Division assembles in tight formations and begins advancing towards Sword, Juno, and Gold. The Allies planned for German armor to arrive late. Now it's arriving early, too early. And the beaches, still chaotic, cannot absorb the blow that's coming. The weather, already a hidden enemy all day, strikes its final blow. A sudden shift in wind speed creates a powerful cross-current along the Normandy coast. Landing craft already struggling to reach extraction points are pushed off course. Rescue efforts slow. Supply drops miss their intended zones, scattering ammunition and equipment into useless locations. Allied ships, fearing friendly fire, hold back their bombardment just as the Germans move closer. Artillery that could pin down enemy armor goes silent at the worst possible moment. On the beaches, infantry wait for the first rumble of tanks, knowing they have almost nothing to stop them. This weather shift seems minor to the outside observer, but in the calculus of war, small details topple massive plans. This is the moment nature itself joins the German defense. A single misinterpreted signal becomes the next fracture. A US unit at Omaha reports limited progress up a narrow ravine. The message travels up the chain, distorted by static-filled radios and exhausted officers. By the time it reaches high command, it sounds like a possible breakthrough. Eisenhower delays the decision to withdraw for one crucial hour, hoping this thin thread of progress might become a lifeline. It doesn't. The breakthrough collapses under a wave of German mortar fire. Survivors scatter back to the beach, unable to hold even a shallow trench. That 1 hour delay becomes fatal. It gives German armor exactly the time it needs to close the distance. When Eisenhower finally orders a retreat, it's too late. The turning point has passed. The window for salvation has slammed shut. The German commanders sense weakness and seize the moment with tactical precision. At Sword Beach, 21st Panzer launches its attack. Tanks crest the ridgelines and descend toward Allied positions. Their silhouettes, black against the fading sky, look like iron predators hunting wounded prey. British troops fire back with rifles, Piat launchers, improvised barricades, but armor shrugs off their efforts. Infantry supporting the tanks sweep forward, clearing trenches, retaking strongpoints. At Juno, Canadian units brace for impact. They fight with staggering courage, holding lines with dwindling ammunition. But without armor of their own, the defense becomes untenable. German forces push them steadily backward. At Gold, Panzerlehr strikes the decisive blow. Their advance cuts off evacuation corridors, trapping some British units between rising tides and advancing tanks. The Allies do not break because of cowardice. They break because physics, timing, and steel overwhelm human resolve. This is the moment the invasion becomes a retreat. Command voices, normally filled with confidence, now tremble with something colder certainty. So staff historian later writes, "This was the hour the Allies realized they were no longer fighting to win Normandy. They were fighting to survive it." Officers aboard Allied ships look through binoculars and see the unthinkable. German armor reaching the beaches while Allied troops still cling to scattered foxholes. This is the image that seals the day. This is the moment every planner feared, but never allowed themselves to imagine. The German counterattack has arrived while the Allies are still on the sand. The turning point has become irreversible. Withdrawal is no longer a choice. It is the only path left. As evacuation begins, panic remains contained, but only barely. Landing craft attempting to approach the beaches face concentrated fire from German guns, now pushed dangerously close to the waterline. Some craft explode before reaching shore. Others retreat under heavy damage. The beaches shrink in the rising tide. Wounded soldiers are carried through surf that drags men under with each wave. Pilots circle overhead, helpless to stem the carnage below. One Allied officer later reflects, "We lost the future in an afternoon. It wasn't the lack of courage, it wasn't the lack of planning. It was the simple, brutal arithmetic of timing. The Germans arrived at the exact moment the Allies lost cohesion. The turning point is complete. The invasion is broken. Darkness creeps across Normandy. Fires silhouette German armor rolling across sand, still scattered with Allied equipment. The Allies disappear into the night, leaving behind beaches that were meant to become gateways to liberation. Instead, they become symbols of a failed gamble. The turning point has passed, but its consequences haven't yet unfolded. Those consequences stretch across continents and alliances, shaping every decision that follows. And now we step into the world that emerges from this failure. The world the Allies hoped never to see. The world where D-Day has fallen. The breaking point. By the second week, the consequences of the failed landings reached far beyond the shores of Normandy. In London, war cabinet meetings stretched long into the night. Churchill, shaken but unbroken, demanded alternatives. Could they attempt another landing? Could Italy become the new gateway? Could airborne assaults open a breach elsewhere? Every proposal carried impossible risks. Troops were exhausted. Landing craft were destroyed. Air superiority, once unquestioned, was now contested as the Luftwaffe took advantage of Allied disarray. In Washington, Roosevelt faced pressure from Congress. Some voices demanded a defensive pivot-halt offensive plans, protect the Western Hemisphere, and avoid throwing more lives into what now seemed a grinder with no clear exit. But military leaders understood a harsher truth. Without opening a second front, the war could drag on for years. The Western democracies were cornered. Meanwhile, the German High Command celebrated but understood the danger of arrogance. Hitler saw the victory as proof of destiny, but generals like Rommel and Rundstedt knew the Allies would try again, and next time, perhaps with overwhelming force. Even as Europe remained under Axis control, cracks appeared. The Eastern Front demanded endless divisions. Supply lines were strained, oil reserves thinned. Germany had won a battle, not the war. Yet this single victory reshaped everything. In the Allied ranks, anger simmered beneath the grief. Soldiers blamed faulty intelligence, miscommunication, timing, anything to make sense of the chaos. Commanders blamed weather, deception failures, underestimation of German resilience. But beneath all the noise lay a simple, chilling realization. If they failed again, Europe might be lost. And so new strategies began to form, bolder, riskier, forged in desperation. In the months following the failed landings, the world shifted. The Allied command re-evaluated everything, from amphibious doctrine to intelligence coordination. Factories in the United States doubled production of landing craft, bombers, and armored vehicles. New training programs were created, forged in the lessons of Normandy's disaster. Politically, the shock reverberated across continents. Resistance movements in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands suffered devastating setbacks as German security forces cracked down with renewed confidence. Many underground networks were forced deeper into hiding, losing crucial momentum. The Soviets, fighting alone on the Eastern Front, demanded more support. Stalin interpreted the failure as a betrayal, an unspoken expectation that the Red Army should continue bleeding while the West struggled to mount an effective second front. Tension between allies grew, adding strain to an already fragile partnership. Germany, meanwhile, capitalized on its unexpected triumph. The propaganda machine declared the defeat of the Anglo-American invasion as proof of German invincibility. Recruitment swelled, morale soared, factories were pushed into overdrive to seize the moment. But inside the Wehrmacht, experienced commanders knew the victory brought as many problems as advantages. Reinforcements had been diverted from the Eastern Front to repel the invasion. Now, shifting them back risked weakening the Atlantic Wall against future attempts. The Eastern Front continued burning through divisions at an unsustainable rate. The German war machine still faced critical shortages: fuel, rubber, transport vehicles, issues no battlefield victory could solve. Still, the delay in opening a second front allowed Germany to launch offensives in 1945 that would have been impossible otherwise, extending the war and increasing global devastation. For the Allies, the failure at Normandy hardened resolve. Britain and America intensified strategic bombing, targeting oil fields and rail networks. New invasion sites were analyzed: Brittany, the Bay of Biscay, even the Balkans. Every decision carried the weight of Normandy's ghosts. The world understood one truth: the war would not end quickly, and the next Allied gamble would have to succeed, no matter the cost. History is a battlefield of choices, crossroads, and irreversible moments. The failure of D-Day, had it happened, would stand as one of the most consequential turning points of the 20th century. In analyzing this alternate path, we step beyond emotion and into the realm of pure strategy. A failed landing would not simply be a military defeat, it would be a collapse of timing, coordination, and faith. It would highlight how fragile even the best-laid plans can be when weather, intelligence, and enemy readiness collide. For scholars, one lesson rises above all. Modern warfare rewards adaptability. Any army incapable of learning faster than its opponent invites disaster. Normandy's alternate outcome shows us what happens when that learning curve bends in the wrong direction. Yet the deeper question remains: how does a single event reshape the fate of millions? The answer echoes far beyond the beaches, and it brings us to the broader implications still rippling through this scenario. Strategists often point to a simple truth: grand victories require grand coordination. D-Day was the largest amphibious undertaking in history, and its failure would expose the razor-thin margin between triumph and catastrophe. Analysts would dissect each element: landing craft shortages, miscommunication between beach commanders, paratrooper dispersal, timing errors, German counterattacks, and conclude that the invasion collapsed under the weight of accumulated imperfections. But here is the paradox. Even in defeat, the Allies possessed overwhelming resources. The industrial might of the United States and the persistence of Britain were forces Germany could not match over time. Thus, this alternate timeline teaches that one setback, even a monumental one, does not dictate final outcomes. Instead, it shifts costs, prolongs suffering, and alters the shape of victory. From a historian's vantage point, the failed invasion underscores how wars are not won by one battle, but by the relentless momentum of national will. In leadership studies, Normandy's hypothetical failure becomes a case study in pressure, decision-making, and consequence. Commanders on both sides operated under impossible constraints, weather windows slamming shut, logistical lines stretched to their limits, and intelligence that changed by the hour. Their choices reveal the weight of command, the need to act without perfect information, to pivot decisively, to inspire under fire. Historians often say that leaders are forged in moments where hesitation is fatal. In this alternate world, hesitation on any side could magnify into disaster. The lesson is sobering. Military power is not merely tanks, ships, and rifles. It is also clarity, adaptability, and the moral courage to accept responsibility for outcomes, whether triumphant or tragic. This reflection pushes us to consider our own lives. How often are we forced to make imperfect decisions, hoping the tide will turn? For military scholars, the failed invasion becomes a laboratory of possibilities. Would the Allies attempt a second landing in France? Would they shift their efforts to the Mediterranean or Balkans? Would the Soviet advance accelerate or collapse under renewed German pressure? Each scenario reveals a deeper truth about global conflict. A war of this scale relies not on a single battle, but on countless interconnected struggles, logistics, resource exploitation, civilian resolve, and international cooperation. Ultimately, this alternate path highlights the fragility of victory and the staggering consequences of failure. War, when stripped of flags and rhetoric, is a contest of endurance. And in this version of history, endurance becomes the deciding factor more than ever. The reflection draws to a close with one final thought. The world we know today was shaped by moments that came perilously close to unraveling.